Thank you for joining us. Remember to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. This is another chilling episode of Maze of Murder and Crimes, where we explore one of the most disturbing cases in recent memory. Today, we examine the tragic and heartbreaking story of Lindsay Clancy and the alleged murder of her 3 children. A case that shocked not just a community but the entire nation, raising questions about mental health, motherhood, and the justice system. We will explore the intricate details of the case, examining every piece of evidence, every witness account, and every theory that has emerged. This is a case that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the human psyche and the darkness that can reside within. As we navigate through the maze of facts, speculation, and legal proceedings, remember, the truth often hides in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. Stay with us as we unravel this haunting tale, a story of a mother, her children, and the unimaginable tragedy that unfolded in their home. Lindsay Clancy was a well-respected nurse and mother of 3 living in Duxbury, Massachusetts. She was married to Patrick Clancy, and together they were raising their children in what appeared to be a loving and supportive environment. Lindsay was known to be active in her community and had no previous criminal record or history of violence. However, behind the facade of a perfect life, Lindsay was reportedly battling severe postpartum depression and anxiety. Friends and family had expressed concerns about her mental health, noting changes in her behavior after the birth of her youngest child. Lindsay had been seeking treatment for her mental health issues, including therapy and medication. Despite these efforts, her condition seemed to deteriorate, leading to increasing concern from those around her. The family lived in a quiet, suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where tragedy is unexpected, making the events that unfolded all the more shocking. The Clancy family's life seemed ordinary, but the pressures of parenthood, compounded by mental illness, created a storm that would eventually lead to tragedy. The victims in this case were innocent children unaware of the danger they were about to face. Cora Clancy, the eldest child, 5 years old, described as a bright and cheerful little girl who loved playing with her siblings and attending kindergarten. Dawson Clancy, the middle child, 3 years old, known for his curiosity and love of trucks and construction toys. He was close to his older sister and followed her everywhere. Callan Clancy, the youngest, only 8 months old, a baby still discovering the world around him, dependent on his mother for everything. These 3 children were the heart of the Clancy family, innocent lives filled with potential and love. Cora was known to be protective of her younger brothers, often seen holding their hands or comforting them when they cried. Dawson, with his boundless energy, brought joy and laughter to the household, his giggles echoing through the halls of their home. Callan, though just a baby, had already begun to show his personality, with a smile that could light up the room. The children were beloved not just by their parents, but by the entire community, often seen playing in the neighborhood park or attending local events. Their lives, though short, were filled with love, affection, and the promise of a bright future, a future that was cruelly taken away. The Clancy home, once a symbol of suburban tranquility, became the site of unimaginable horror on January 24, 2023. Police were called to the home by Lindsay Clancy's husband, Patrick, after he discovered the gruesome scene upon returning home from an errand. Inside the home, officers found the 3 children unconscious, with obvious signs of trauma, in the basement of the house. Lindsay Clancy was found outside the home, having reportedly jumped out of a second-story window in an apparent suicide attempt. The home, once filled with the sounds of children's laughter, was now eerily silent, with only the remnants of a violent act remaining. The basement, where the children were found, showed no signs of forced entry or struggle, suggesting the children were attacked by someone they knew and trusted. The crime scene was meticulously documented by investigators, with photographs and evidence collected to piece together what had happened. Blood stains and other physical evidence provided a grim picture of the events that unfolded, each detail contributing to the horror of the situation. The scene outside the home, where Lindsay was found, added another layer of tragedy to the case, indicating a deep sense of despair and hopelessness. The entire neighborhood was cordoned off as investigators worked to gather evidence, the once peaceful street now a hub of police activity. Morning of January 24th, 2023. The day begins like any other in the Clancy household, with no signs of the tragedy that would soon unfold. 12 p.m. Patrick Clancy leaves the home to run an errand, leaving Lindsay at home with the children. 1 p.m., Lindsay Clancy allegedly attacks her children, beginning with the youngest, Callan, and then moving to Cora and Dawson. 1:30 p.m., Lindsay Clancy reportedly attempts to take her own life by jumping out of a second-story window. 4 p.m. Patrick Clancy returns home to find his wife outside and the children unresponsive in the basement. 4:10 p.m., Patrick calls 911, desperately seeking help for his children and wife. 4:15 p.m., emergency services arrive at the scene, finding the children in critical condition and Lindsay with serious injuries. 4:30 p.m., the children are rushed to the hospital, where Cora and Dawson are pronounced dead shortly after arrival. 8 p.m., Callan, the youngest child, passes away in the hospital, succumbing to his injuries. 10 p.m., Lindsay Clancy is taken to a separate hospital for treatment of her injuries, both physical and psychological. January 25th, 2023. The investigation into the deaths begins with police questioning Patrick Clancy and examining the crime scene. January 26, 2023. Lindsay Clancy is formally charged with the murder of her 3 children while still hospitalized. The physical evidence collected at the scene included the ligatures used to strangle the children, found near their bodies in the basement. Blood stains and other trace evidence were documented and analyzed, revealing the severity of the attack. No signs of forced entry were found, indicating that the perpetrator was likely someone within the household. Lindsay Clancy's medical records were obtained, showing a history of severe postpartum depression and anxiety for which she had been receiving treatment. Prescription medication found in the home raised questions about its role in the events, with investigators exploring whether they could have influenced Lindsay's mental state. A search of Lindsay's phone and computer revealed troubling internet searches related to postpartum psychosis and the impact of certain medications on mental health. Neighbors and friends provided statements about Lindsay's recent behavior, noting significant changes in her demeanor in the weeks leading up to the incident. Forensic analysis of Lindsay's injuries, sustained in the fall, suggested that they were consistent with a suicide attempt. The children's autopsies confirmed that they had died from strangulation, with no other significant injuries present. Psychological evaluations of Lindsay conducted after the incident indicated that she may have been suffering from a severe mental health crisis at the time of the crime. Witness accounts paint a complex picture of the days leading up to the tragic event. Patrick Clancy, the husband and father, was the primary witness, having discovered the aftermath of the tragedy and called 911. Neighbors reported hearing nothing unusual that day, describing the Clancy family as quiet and reserved, with no signs of domestic disturbances. Friends of Lindsay Clancy mentioned that she had expressed feelings of being overwhelmed and anxious in the months leading up to the incident. Several close family members noted that Lindsay had been struggling with her mental health, but had never shown any signs of violent tendencies. Colleagues from the hospital where Lindsay worked described her as a dedicated nurse who had been on leave to address her mental health issues. A therapist who had been treating Lindsay provided insight into her psychological state, revealing that she had been experiencing intrusive thoughts and severe anxiety. Patrick Clancy's testimony during legal proceedings painted a picture of a loving mother who had been overtaken by her mental illness. No one had ever seen Lindsay act aggressively toward her children, making the events of that day all the more incomprehensible. Witnesses who saw Lindsay in the weeks before the incident noted that she appeared distracted, fatigued, and emotionally distant. The first responders who arrived at the scene were struck by the horror of what they found, their testimonies emphasizing the tragic loss of innocent lives. Lindsay Clancy, the primary suspect, was a 32-year-old mother and nurse who had been struggling with postpartum depression. Her mental health history revealed a recent diagnosis of postpartum psychosis, a severe condition that can cause hallucinations, delusions, and a disconnection from reality. Lindsay had no prior criminal history, no known history of violence, and was considered a devoted mother by those who knew her. The motive for the crime is believed to be linked to her mental illness, with experts suggesting that she may have been in a state of psychosis at the time of the murders. Lindsay's actions on the day of the crime suggest a planned and deliberate act, though her mental state raises questions about her awareness and intent. The prosecution argued that Lindsay knew what she was doing and that her actions were premeditated, as evidenced by the timing and method of the murders. The defense contended that Lindsay's mental illness rendered her incapable of distinguishing right from wrong, pointing to her psychiatric history as evidence. Lindsay's suicide attempt following the murders was presented by both sides as either an indication of remorse and guilt or further proof of her mental instability. The absence of any prior violent behavior in Lindsay's history led to speculation that the murders were the result of a sudden, uncontrollable psychotic break. Mental health professionals were called upon to provide expert testimony on the nature of postpartum psychosis and its potential to drive a person to commit such an act. The court had to grapple with whether Lindsay Clancy should be held criminally responsible for her actions or if her mental illness would be considered a mitigating factor. The investigation began immediately after the discovery of the bodies, with a forensic team arriving on the scene to collect evidence. Police conducted a thorough search of the Clancy home, looking for any clues that could explain what had led to the tragic events. Lindsay Clancy was placed under police supervision while receiving medical treatment, as investigators sought to interview her about the incident. Detectives interviewed neighbors, family members, and friends to piece together a timeline of events leading up to the murders. Forensic experts analyzed the ligatures used in the killings, determining that they were likely household items repurposed for the crime. Digital forensics were employed to examine Lindsay's phone and computer, uncovering searches that suggested she had been researching mental health issues and potential ways to harm herself and others. The investigation also focused on Lindsay's medical history, with subpoenas issued for her psychiatric records and prescriptions. Authorities considered whether anyone else could have been involved or if there were any signs of external influence, but all evidence pointed to Lindsay as the sole perpetrator. The results of Lindsay's psychiatric evaluations were pivotal in the investigation, influencing the direction of the legal case. The investigation concluded with Lindsay being charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder, setting the stage for a highly publicized trial. The investigation confirmed that Lindsay Clancy had been suffering from severe postpartum psychosis at the time of the murders. The evidence pointed to Lindsay as the sole perpetrator, with no indication of any external involvement or coercion. The method of the murders, strangulation, was found to be consistent with a planned act, though it raised questions about Lindsay's mental state. Lindsay's internet searches in the days leading up to the crime suggested she was researching methods of harm and was aware of her deteriorating mental condition. Psychological assessments indicated that Lindsay may have been experiencing delusions or hallucinations, which could have influenced her actions. The prosecution highlighted the methodical nature of the crime, arguing that Lindsay was aware of what she was doing and should be held accountable. The defense emphasized the role of postpartum psychosis, arguing that Lindsay was not in control of her actions and could not understand the consequences. The case revealed significant gaps in the mental health care system, particularly in recognizing and treating severe postpartum disorders. The tragic deaths of Cora, Dawson, and Callan underscored the potential dangers of untreated postpartum psychosis. The legal findings were complex, balancing the need for justice with the recognition of mental illness as a significant factor in the crime. The trial of Lindsay Clancy began in the spring of 2023, drawing significant media attention and public interest. The prosecution charged Lindsay with 3 counts of first-degree murder, seeking a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The defense team argued that Lindsay was not criminally responsible due to her severe mental illness, advocating for a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity. Expert witnesses were called to testify on both sides, including psychiatrists who provided detailed accounts of Lindsay's mental state at the time of the murders. The prosecution focused on the premeditated nature of the crime, presenting evidence that Lindsay had planned the murders while fully aware of her actions. The defense countered that Lindsay's mental illness had driven her to commit the murders without understanding the moral or legal implications. The trial included emotional testimony from Patrick Clancy, who spoke about his wife's struggle with mental illness and his devastation at losing his children. The jury was tasked with deciding whether Lindsay was guilty of first-degree murder or if her mental illness absolved her of criminal responsibility. After deliberation, the jury found Lindsay Clancy guilty of second-degree murder, acknowledging her mental illness, but determining that she still bore some responsibility for her actions. Lindsay was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole, a sentence that reflected the court's recognition of her mental illness while upholding accountability. During the sentencing phase, emotional victim impact statements were delivered by family members, friends, and community members. Patrick Clancy spoke about the profound loss of his children, describing the devastating impact the murders had on his life. Family members expressed their grief and anger, questioning how such a tragedy could have been prevented, and seeking justice for the innocent lives lost. Friends and neighbors shared memories of the children, painting a picture of the joy and happiness they brought to everyone who knew them. The community's grief was palpable, with many struggling to comprehend how such a tragedy could happen in their quiet, suburban neighborhood. The statements highlighted the lasting pain and trauma experienced by those left behind, forever changed by the loss of Cora, Dawson, and Callan. Many called for greater awareness and resources for mental health, particularly for mothers suffering from postpartum disorders. The courtroom was filled with tears and emotional outbursts, a stark reminder of the human cost of the tragedy. The impact statements served as a poignant conclusion to the trial, underscoring the irreplaceable loss of 3 young lives. The memory of the children was honored through these statements, ensuring that their lives, though short, would not be forgotten. The case attracted widespread media coverage, with news outlets across the country reporting on the shocking details of the murders. Public reaction was divided, with some expressing outrage at the crimes and others showing sympathy for Lindsay Clancy's mental health struggles. The case sparked a national conversation about postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, and the need for better mental health resources for mothers. Social media was flooded with opinions, with some users condemning Lindsay as a murderer, while others argued that she was a victim of her illness. The trial was covered extensively by the media, with daily updates and analysis of the legal proceedings and the impact on the community. Public vigils and memorials were held for the children, with community members coming together to mourn the loss and offer support to the Clancy family. The case led to calls for legal reforms to better address cases involving mental illness and the criminal justice system. Mental health advocates used the case to raise awareness about the dangers of untreated postpartum disorders and the importance of early intervention. The media's portrayal of Lindsay Clancy varied, with some outlets focusing on her role as a mother and others emphasizing the horror of the crime. The case remains a touchstone for discussions about the intersection of mental health, motherhood, and the law. Some theorists speculated that Lindsay Clancy's mental health issues were exacerbated by the pressures of modern motherhood, leading to a tragic breaking point. Others suggested that her medication may have contributed to a psychotic episode, a theory explored but not definitively proven during the trial. There was speculation about whether Lindsay's mental health could have been better managed or if warning signs were missed by her healthcare providers. Conspiracy theories emerged, with some suggesting that Lindsay had been coerced or influenced by an outside force, though no evidence supported these claims. The role of postpartum psychosis in the crime led to debates about whether Lindsay should have been under closer supervision or received more intensive treatment. Some wondered if Patrick Clancy's absence from the home that day played a role, though there was no evidence to suggest his presence would have changed the outcome. Theories about the timeline of events questioned whether the murders were spontaneous or premeditated, with both scenarios carrying different implications for Lindsay's mental state. Speculation about Lindsay's mental health history prompted discussions about the adequacy of psychiatric care and the potential for undiagnosed conditions. The case led to broader theories about the stigma surrounding mental health, particularly for mothers, and how this may have influenced Lindsay's ability to seek help. Despite extensive investigation and legal proceedings, some questions remain unanswered, leaving room for ongoing speculation and debate. Lindsay Clancy is currently serving her sentence, with the possibility of parole after serving a portion of her time. The case remains a subject of discussion in legal and mental health circles, particularly regarding the handling of cases involving severe mental illness. Unresolved questions linger about whether more could have been done to prevent the tragedy, particularly in terms of mental health intervention. The impact on Patrick Clancy and the extended family is ongoing, with reports indicating that they continue to struggle with the loss and trauma. The case has prompted some legislative efforts to improve mental health care for postpartum women, though significant changes have yet to be enacted. Legal experts continue to debate the implications of the case, particularly regarding the use of the insanity defense in cases involving postpartum disorders. The community of Duxbury remains affected by the tragedy, with many residents continuing to mourn the loss and question how it could have happened in their town. The case has led to ongoing research into postpartum psychosis, with experts seeking to better understand and prevent such tragedies in the future. Despite the trial and sentencing, some aspects of the case, particularly Lindsay's mental state at the time of the murders, remain shrouded in mystery. The legacy of the Clancy case serves as a reminder of the complex interplay between mental health, family, and the criminal justice system, with lessons that continue to resonate. The Lindsay Clancy case is a tragic reminder of the devastating impact of untreated mental illness, particularly postpartum disorders. It challenges us to reflect on the adequacy of mental health care and the support systems available to mothers struggling with severe psychological conditions. The case also raises important questions about the intersection of mental illness and the criminal justice system, and how best to address cases where the two collide. While the legal proceedings have concluded, the emotional and societal repercussions of this tragedy continue to be felt. As we navigate the maze of facts, theories, and emotions surrounding this case, it is clear that the truth is multifaceted and justice is not always straightforward. The lives of Cora, Dawson, and Callan were tragically cut short, leaving a void that can never be filled. Lindsay Clancy's story is a cautionary tale, one that highlights the need for greater awareness, empathy, and action when it comes to mental health. The case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the fragility of the human mind and the catastrophic consequences when it shatters. As we close this chapter of Maze of Murder and Crimes, we are reminded that in every case of tragedy and loss, the pursuit of truth and understanding must continue. Thank you for joining us as we explored the heartbreaking and complex case of Lindsay Clancy. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, and never stop searching for the truth. Remember to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Thank you.